In the winter of 1847, beneath chandeliers that glittered like indifferent constellations, Lady Seraphina Whitcomb learned the precise weight of humiliation. The ballroom of Harrington House shimmered with candlelight and polished laughter, yet the air felt thin as frost in her lungs. Silk skirts whispered across marble floors, and gentlemen bowed with rehearsed gallantry, but every courteous gesture seemed edged with calculation. Society had gathered ostensibly for charity. In truth, it had assembled for spectacle. And on that particular evening, Seraphina became the spectacle. She stood near a column of white-veined marble, gloved hands folded with deliberate composure, her ivory gown falling in restrained elegance about her slender frame. Her beauty was not the flamboyant sort that commanded a room, it was the quiet radiance of someone accustomed to listening before speaking. Observant gray eyes, thoughtful and steady, marked her as a woman of inward strength. Yet strength in a daughter was seldom considered currency. Her father, Baron Whitcomb, had once entered such rooms to warm applause. Now he moved through them with the brittle politeness of a man conscious of creditors. The lines about his mouth had deepened. His waistcoat hung a shade looser than fashion permitted. He avoided his daughter's gaze as though it were a mirror reflecting his failures. The announcement came without warning. A portly gentleman with 2 rosy cheeks called for attention, his voice slicing through the waltz. Conversation faltered. Fans paused mid-air. Seraphina felt the silence settle like snow upon her shoulders. "It is my distinct pleasure," the gentleman declared, "to share the joyous news that Lady Seraphina Whitcomb is to be united in matrimony with His Grace, the Duke of Ashford." For one suspended second there was no sound at all. Then whispers erupted, soft, sharp, merciless. "The Duke? Impossible. She is sacrificed. Poor child." Seraphina did not move. She did not faint or protest or allow the tremor in her chest to reach her hands. She merely inclined her head, as though accepting congratulations for a felicitous engagement rather than a transaction. But inside her, something fragile bent under sudden strain. The Duke of Ashford was a name spoken in drawing-rooms with a mixture of fascination and reproach. Lucian Ashford possessed an estate vast enough to command envy and a reputation tarnished enough to invite disdain. Tales followed him like perfume. Whiskey decanters emptied before midnight, fortunes lost and won on reckless wagers, laughter too loud, temper too cold. He had inherited title and tragedy in equal measure, and rumor insisted he had drowned the latter in drink. The waltz resumed, though no one danced. Seraphina found her mother at her side, pale and trembling. "It is settled," Lady Whitcomb whispered, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your father had no alternative." No alternative. The phrase echoed, hollow and absolute. Before Seraphina could summon a reply, a subtle disturbance rippled through the crowd near the entrance. Conversations shifted direction. Heads turned. The Duke had arrived. He did not stride so much as occupy space. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in black evening coat and immaculate cravat, Lucian Ashford carried himself with an ease that bordered on defiance. If he had been drinking, it did not show in his step. His dark hair, slightly disordered, lent him a severity softened only by eyes of striking, contemplative blue. Those eyes did not wander, they fixed. They fixed on her. The murmurs quieted as he approached, boots measured against marble. Seraphina felt each step as a distant drumbeat within her pulse. He halted before her, bowed with precise courtesy, and took her gloved hand. His touch was warm, steady, nothing of the careless libertine the gossip sheets adored. "Lady Seraphina," he said, voice low yet carrying, "I trust this announcement has not been delivered in a manner unworthy of your dignity." It was not an apology. It was not indifference. It was something more unsettling, acknowledgment. She met his gaze without flinching. "The manner, Your Grace, was chosen without my consultation. I shall endeavor to endure it with grace nonetheless." A flicker, approval, amusement, touched his expression before vanishing. The room leaned closer, hungry. "If this arrangement displeases you," he continued evenly, "I am prepared to assume the scandal of refusal." Gasps scattered like startled birds. Seraphina's heart stumbled. Refusal would ruin her family utterly. Creditors would descend. Her father's remaining estates would be stripped bare. Yet the offer itself, public, deliberate, shifted something imperceptible. It implied she possessed choice, even if circumstance denied its exercise. "A daughter's duty," she replied carefully, "is seldom guided by inclination." "And a gentleman's," he returned, "ought never be guided by cruelty." The words fell between them, weighted with implication. Around them, society watched for signs of discord, for spectacle, for weakness. Serafina sensed the Duke's scrutiny not as appraisal of property, but as evaluation of resolve. It unsettled her more than disdain would have. "Then I shall not be cruel," he added softly, for her ears alone. The orchestra resumed its tentative melody. Couples drifted back to motion, though glances continued to dart toward the unlikely pair. Lucien released her hand, yet not abruptly. His thumb brushed lightly across her wrist, an almost imperceptible gesture, grounding rather than possessive. In that fleeting contact lay contradiction. The notorious drunkard stood sober and deliberate. The supposed tyrant offered escape at cost to himself. The man she had imagined as her jailer behaved instead as though he, too, were bound by unseen chains. As he stepped back, Serafina felt the first tremor of something unfamiliar, not hope, not yet, but curiosity sharpened by apprehension. She had prepared herself to endure humiliation, she had not prepared to question it. Her father approached then, face flushed with strained gratitude. "Your Grace," he stammered, "you have our eternal thanks." Lucien inclined his head without looking at him. His attention remained unwaveringly upon Serafina. "I would have no gratitude purchased at the expense of honesty," he said. "Let us at least begin with truth." The remark unsettled her father, but it anchored her. Truth. What truth could exist in a marriage forged from debt? The Duke offered his arm. "May I claim the first dance, my lady?" The request, simple and formal, carried weight. To accept was to seal the spectacle, to decline was to ignite scandal. She placed her hand upon his sleeve. They moved into the center of the floor as the waltz swelled. Candlelight caught in his eyes, revealing not dissipation but calculation, not recklessness but restraint. His hand settled at her waist, firm yet respectful, guiding without constraining. "You fear me," he observed quietly as they turned. "I fear disgrace," she answered. "Then permit me," he murmured, drawing her slightly closer as the music carried them, "to give you reason to fear disappointment instead." The distinction unsettled her more than any threat. As they revolved beneath indifferent chandeliers, Serafina realized that the man she had been sold to might not be the villain society had promised. And that possibility, far more than humiliation, threatened to unravel the careful armor she had worn all evening. Rain accompanied Lady Serafina Whitcomb to Ashford Manor as though the heavens themselves disapproved of the arrangement. The carriage wheels cut through mud-slick roads, lanterns swaying in the wind, while the estate rose in the distance, vast, iron-gated, and solemnly magnificent. It was not a home fashioned for laughter, it was a fortress of legacy, its stone facade darkened by weather and memory. As she stepped down beneath a black umbrella held by a silent footman, Serafina felt the invisible weight of her new title settle upon her shoulders like a cloak stitched with expectation. Inside, the entrance hall glowed with restrained splendor. Tall candelabras lined the marble corridor, their flames steady despite the storm's percussion against leaded windows. Portraits of former dukes watched from gilded frames, stern and unyielding. She sensed in their painted gazes a silent inquiry: would she endure? Or would she fracture? Lucien Ashford removed his gloves with unhurried precision. He had spoken little during the journey, yet his silence had not been oppressive. It had felt deliberate, as though he were measuring the space she required to gather her strength. Now, beneath the echoing arch of his ancestral home, he regarded her not as property delivered, but as a guest crossing an uncertain threshold. "You shall find no locked doors here," he said quietly. "Only rooms that have forgotten warmth." The remark lingered between them, neither boast nor apology. Before she could frame a reply, the housekeeper approached to conduct her upstairs. Lucien did not follow. He remained below, a solitary figure framed by shadow and candlelight, as though granting her first possession of the manor's upper silence. Her chamber exceeded expectation. A fire had been laid, the hearth crackled gently, scenting the air with cedar smoke. Velvet draperies of muted ivory framed tall windows overlooking a rain-drenched garden. Upon a writing desk rested a single object that did not belong to the room's austere arrangement, a slim leather-bound volume tied with pale ribbon. Serafina approached it with cautious curiosity. The title, embossed in fading gold, revealed a collection of poems by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, verses she had once quoted years ago, at a small literary gathering her father scarcely remembered. Her pulse faltered. Between the pages lay pressed white roses, their petals fragile yet preserved. A card accompanied them. "A house without gentleness is merely stone. L.A." She lowered herself into the chair as though her knees could no longer sustain her. This was no careless gesture. It was observant, intentional. The Duke had remembered something spoken long before death had shadowed her family. The knowledge unsettled her more deeply than indifference would have. The following morning, the storm gave way to brittle sunlight. Ashford Manor revealed itself in clearer lines. Expansive lawns silvered with dew, hedgerows trimmed with meticulous discipline, a conservatory of glass panes glistening at the garden's edge. When Seraphina ventured outdoors, she discovered the conservatory unlocked and warmed despite the chill. Inside bloomed rows of white roses. Not hothouse extravagance, but careful cultivation. Each stem pruned with patience, each blossom protected from winter's bite. A gardener bowed respectfully at her entrance. His Grace instructed they be tended daily, the man said. He remarked that roses require constancy. Seraphina touched a petal with trembling fingertips. Constancy was not a quality associated with her husband in any drawing room she had known. The illusion of calm fractured that evening. A dinner had been arranged to introduce the Duchess of Ashford to neighboring nobility. The table gleamed with crystal and silver, candles reflected in polished goblets. Conversation fluttered politely until the arrival of Lady Penhest, a widow famed less for grief than for appetite for scandal. Lady Penhest's smile curved like a blade. "Your Grace," she drawled, eyes lingering upon Seraphina, "we were relieved to learn the estate's cellars remain thoroughly stocked." A ripple of subdued laughter followed. Lucien did not smile. He folded his napkin with measured care before replying. "The cellars, my lady, are a matter of inventory. My household, however, concerns discipline." The rebuke was subtle yet unmistakable. Lady Penhest's lashes fluttered in feigned innocence. "Of course," she murmured. "We should not mistake reputation for habit." Seraphina felt the room's attention tilt toward her, waiting for signs of discomfort. Her father's debt still clung to her name like perfume. If the Duke resumed visible dissipation, she would bear the shame beside him. Lucien turned to her with deliberate gentleness. "Duchess, will you favor us with your opinion on the conservatory renovations? I believe the white roses have already flourished under your regard." The inquiry shifted the focus. He was not defending himself, he was elevating her. Seraphina recognized the strategy even as gratitude warmed her chest. "They flourish because they are tended faithfully," she answered, voice steady. "No bloom survives neglect." Lucien's gaze held hers a fraction longer than propriety required. Indeed. The exchange might have ended there had not Lady Penhest leaned forward once more. "And what of faithfulness in other matters, your Grace? The town wagers on how long this admirable restraint shall endure." Silence thickened. The insult was no longer veiled. Lucien rose. The movement was unhurried, yet it commanded immediate stillness. "Madam," he said, voice cool as winter steel, "I have endured speculation with indifference. I shall not endure disrespect toward my wife." The word wife did not sound reluctant. It sounded chosen. "If wagers must be placed," he continued, "I suggest they concern how swiftly I grow intolerant of insolence." Color drained from Lady Penhest's cheeks. The gathered guests averted their eyes. Seraphina felt the tremor of something shifting irrevocably. The notorious Duke had defended her publicly, risking ridicule to silence it. Not theatrically, not drunkenly, but with measured authority. After the guests dispersed, she found him alone in the library, decanter untouched upon a sideboard. Firelight gilded the lines of his profile, revealing weariness beneath composure. "You need not champion me so fiercely," she said, stepping into the warm glow. "I do not champion you," he replied. "I honor what is mine to protect." The phrasing struck her with complicated force. "Am I to be protected from rumor?" she asked quietly. "Or from you?" His jaw tightened slightly, not in anger but in contemplation. He lifted the decanter, studied the amber liquid within, then set it down again without pouring. "You are to be protected from the version of me they prefer to believe," he answered at last. The confession lingered like the final note of a chord unresolved. Outside, the wind stirred the bare branches against the glass, a restless whisper against stone. Seraphina realized that the central conflict was no longer merely a marriage forged by debt. It was a battle between reputation and reality, between the man society insisted he was and the man who stood before her now, measured, deliberate, withholding something far more dangerous than vice. As she turned to leave, Lucien spoke once more, voice lowered but unmistakably sincere. "Duchess, I shall not have you traded for coin and then diminished by gossip. If there is scandal to be borne, I shall bear it alone." The words should have reassured her. Instead, they unsettled her with new apprehension. For a man who carried scandal so willingly must be guarding a truth far heavier, and she had only begun to glimpse its shadow. The storm arrived without warning, rolling across the Ashford estate in a dark procession of thunder and fractured light. By dusk the sky had become a bruise of violet and iron, and the manor's windows trembled beneath the assault of rain. Servants hurried to secure shutters. Candles were lit in corridors where shadows gathered like conspirators. Serafina stood in the gallery overlooking the entrance hall, watching lightning split the horizon beyond the glass. The violence of the weather felt curiously aligned with the unrest within her. Since the dinner with Lady Penhest, whispers had not ceased. Letters arrived bearing veiled inquiries about the Duke's continued sobriety. Invitations were edged with curiosity rather than warmth. The world waited, breath held, for Lucian Ashford to falter. And with each expectant glance cast in her direction, Serafina felt the precariousness of her new position. If he relapsed into dissipation, she would be pitied. If he maintained restraint, she would be suspected of manipulation. Her dignity hung upon a narrative she did not control. A crack of thunder extinguished half the candles in the hall below. The sudden darkness pressed close, intimate and disquieting. Without quite deciding to do so, Serafina descended the staircase and crossed toward the west wing, drawn by a restless instinct she could neither justify nor silence. She had not yet explored that portion of the manor. The doors were not locked as Lucian had promised, but they were seldom opened. The library awaited her with an austere patience. Tall shelves rose to the ceiling, crowded with leather-bound volumes whose spines bore the patina of generations. A single fire burned low in the grate, casting wavering gold against rows of shadow. At the far end of the room stood Lucian, his back turned, one hand braced upon the mantel as he regarded the storm beyond the windows. He did not startle at her approach. "You should not wander alone in weather such as this," he said, though his tone carried no reprimand. "I find solitude less formidable than speculation," she replied. He turned then, and the lightning's afterglow revealed an expression stripped of public composure. Weariness shadowed his eyes, tension etched his brow. Yet there was clarity there too, an alertness untouched by wine. "Speculation has teeth," he said quietly. "It feeds upon hesitation. And upon silence," she added. The acknowledgment lingered. Rain hammered against the glass with relentless insistence, isolating the manor from the world beyond its gates. In that enforced seclusion, the distance between them felt suddenly untenable. "Why permit it?" she asked at last, her voice steady though her pulse betrayed her. "Why allow them to believe you perpetually intoxicated, perpetually reckless? The truth appears otherwise." Lucian's gaze sharpened, not in anger but in calculation. "Appearances," he said, "are a currency society values more than virtue. It is often safer to be underestimated." "For whom?" she pressed. "For you, or for those who approach you?" He exhaled slowly as though surrendering to an inevitability long deferred. "Years ago," he began, "before your family's misfortune, I attended a gathering at Whitcomb House. You spoke then, not to impress, but to defend a governess accused unjustly of impropriety. You did not raise your voice. You did not seek applause. Yet you prevailed." The memory struck her with startled clarity. She had scarcely considered it remarkable. "I observed," he continued, "how swiftly those assembled altered their opinions once confronted with reason. I learned then that truth is persuasive only when wielded by someone unafraid of censure." She felt the faintest tremor beneath her composure. "You remember an incident I have nearly forgotten." "I remember the quality of courage," he replied. "It is rare." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the lines of his face. In that stark brilliance, he appeared not infamous but resolute. "The reputation you know," he went on, "was cultivated with intention. After my mother's death, alliances were proposed with alarming enthusiasm. Families eager for title presented daughters adorned with rehearsed affection. I found the spectacle intolerable." "So you fashioned yourself undesirable," she said softly. "Indiscriminate vice repels ambition," he answered. "It affords a measure of privacy." The revelation unsettled her more profoundly than scandal ever had. "And yet you agreed to marry me." He stepped closer, the firelight narrowing the distance between them. "I did not agree," he said. "I insisted." The word reverberated. "When I learned of your father's debts," he continued, "I recognized an opportunity not to purchase compliance, but to secure partnership. I knew you would not flatter me. I knew you would not fear me unnecessarily. I believed, perhaps arrogantly, that you might see beyond the facade. And if I had not," she asked. Then I would have borne your contempt as just consequence. The honesty in his voice disarmed her. For the first time since the ballroom announcement, she felt the axis of power shift subtly. She had entered this marriage believing herself sacrificed to necessity. Now she glimpsed deliberation beneath circumstance. You speak of partnership, she said carefully. Yet you guard truths as though they are liabilities. He regarded her with a gravity that stilled the air between them. There are truths, he replied, that endanger more than reputation. Thunder rolled, closer now, vibrating through the floorboards. The storm's fury seemed to echo the unspoken tension binding them. Do you intend to protect me from those truths as well? She asked. His jaw tightened slightly. I intend to protect you from harm. Harm of what nature? She pressed. Gossip? Financial ruin? Or something more deliberate? For a long moment he did not answer. Instead, he crossed to a small escritoire near the hearth and opened a drawer. From it he withdrew a folded document sealed with dark wax. He held it in his hand, thumb resting upon the crest impressed there. This arrived this morning, he said. An anonymous warning. Her breath caught. It alleges, he continued evenly, that certain parties are displeased with the sudden stabilization of your father's affairs. That my refusal to resume former habits has inconvenienced investments predicated upon my decline. Inconvenienced investments, she repeated faintly. There are men, he said, voice hardening, who profit from a duke perceived as incompetent. The implication struck with cold clarity. His reputation had not merely shielded him, it had served others. If he abandoned it, he disrupted more than gossip. And by marrying me, she said slowly, you disrupted expectations further. Yes. Silence expanded, dense and charged. You have made me a participant in a conflict I did not foresee, she said, though without accusation. I have made you Duchess of Ashford, he corrected quietly. That role is seldom free of conflict. Another flash of lightning fractured the sky, casting their reflections stark against the window pane. Two figures bound not merely by contract but by consequence. Serafina felt the last vestige of passive resignation dissolve within her. If danger shadowed his reformation, then her position was not ornamental, it was pivotal. You asked whether I feared you, she said, stepping nearer, compelled by something braver than prudence. I fear instead the parts of your life you have yet to reveal. His gaze held hers, unflinching. Then remain, he said softly, and you shall know them. The invitation was neither romantic nor casual. It was grave, almost solemn. Outside, the storm began to ebb, its rage subsiding into distant murmurs. Yet within the library, a different tempest gathered, one of choice rather than coercion. Serafina realized that the central conflict no longer resided solely in society's judgment or the debts that had bound them. It resided in revelation. To remain beside him meant stepping into intrigue that threatened stability itself. To withdraw meant retreating into the safety of ignorance. She reached toward the sealed document, fingertips brushing the edge of wax. Then do not protect me from truth, she said quietly. Trust me with it. Lucien hesitated only a heartbeat before placing the letter in her hand. As thunder faded beyond the hills, she broke the seal, and saw, scrawled in deliberate ink, a warning that tied her family's past misfortune to forces far. The ink upon the anonymous letter had scarcely dried before its implications began to coil around them both. By morning, the storm had cleared, yet the air within Ashford Manor felt charged as though thunder still lingered in the walls. Serafina stood at the long windows of the east drawing-room, the letter folded carefully in her gloved hand, reading again the deliberate accusation that her father's debts had not been misfortune alone but manipulation, engineered by men who profited from Lucien's supposed dissipation. The words suggested collusion, hinted at investments made in anticipation of a duke too intoxicated to notice encroachment upon his estates. Lucien entered without ceremony, coat fitted precisely, demeanor composed. If he felt the weight of conspiracy tightening around them, he did not display it. Yet the restraint in his posture was sharper than usual, like a blade newly honed. You believe it credible, Serafina said, turning toward him. I believe it plausible, he replied. Several gentlemen have grown accustomed to influencing decisions in my absence. Absence, she repeated. Or neglect. A faint flicker of approval crossed his expression. You perceive swiftly. She crossed the room, placing the letter upon a mahogany table between them. If my father's ruin was encouraged to secure your continued incompetence, then our marriage is more than scandalous, it is inconvenient. Lucien regarded her steadily. Precisely. Silence fell, not strained but resolute. The conflict before them was no longer whispered speculation but strategic hostility. Whoever authored the warning had intended to unsettle them. Instead, it had clarified necessity. To retreat into former habits would satisfy those unseen adversaries. To remain disciplined would expose their designs. "And what shall we do?" she asked. "We shall appear precisely as expected," he answered, voice level. "Until expectation becomes their error." The proposal unsettled her. "You would resume the pretense?" "I would refine it." That afternoon, invitations were dispatched with deliberate flourish. A grand masquerade was announced, an evening of music and indulgence, ostensibly to celebrate the Duchess's arrival. Rumor spread with gratifying speed. By dusk, London speculated that the Duke had relapsed into extravagance, that the marriage had proven intolerable restraint. Serafina observed the preparations with measured calm. Silk banners unfurled along the gallery rails, crystal chandeliers were polished until they shimmered like captive stars. Musicians arrived bearing violins and cellos, their cases gleaming in the candlelight. The manor, once austere, seemed suddenly transformed into a stage upon which perception would be manipulated. "Do you trust me?" Lucien asked quietly as they stood side by side in the ballroom before guests arrived. The question was not rhetorical. "I trust your intent," she replied. "I question only the cost." He inclined his head. The cost of inaction would be greater. Carriages began to arrive in glittering procession. Masks concealed familiar faces, velvet cloaks brushed marble floors. Laughter swelled beneath chandeliers, perfumed and expectant. Lady Penhest entered draped in crimson satin, her eyes alight with anticipation of spectacle. Lucien met each guest with courteous warmth, accepting congratulations tinged with irony. A crystal goblet was placed in his hand, amber liquid caught the light. He lifted it in salute, though Serafina noticed the faintest tightening of his jaw before he touched it to his lips. The performance was meticulous. Whispers circled. "See how swiftly reform dissolves. Poor Duchess." Serafina moved among them with composed elegance, her ivory gown luminous beneath the candlelight. She accepted greetings without defensiveness, offered observations without complaint. If she appeared wounded, the narrative would solidify. Instead, she radiated quiet assurance. As the evening deepened, Lucien mounted the small dais at the far end of the ballroom. Conversation tapered. He removed his mask slowly, revealing an expression neither reckless nor contrite. "My friends," he began, voice carrying with resonant clarity, "it has come to my attention that my conduct is of enduring fascination." Soft laughter rippled. "I would not deprive you of entertainment," he continued, lifting the goblet once more. "Yet I find myself increasingly inclined toward clarity." He paused, allowing tension to gather. "It is true that I have indulged excessively in former years. It is equally true that indulgence renders a man predictable. And predictability, I have discovered, is advantageous, particularly to those who invest in one's decline." A subtle shift moved through the crowd. Lady Penhest's smile faltered. "I have examined certain ledgers," Lucien went on evenly, "and found discrepancies. Estates undervalued. Loans extended at convenient moments. Debts encouraged." A murmur rose, no longer amused. Serafina felt the eyes of the assembly swing toward her, seeking confirmation, weakness, any tremor of disarray. She held her posture steady. Lucien descended from the dais and crossed the floor toward her, boots deliberate against marble. When he reached her, he took her hand openly. "My wife entered this house under circumstances not of her choosing," he said, his gaze sweeping the gathered faces. "She shall not remain subject to circumstances engineered by avarice." The declaration hung in the air like a drawn sword. "Tonight," he continued, "I withdraw from all speculative partnerships associated with my former habits. I invite transparency in all accounts concerning Ashford Holdings. Should any gentleman object, he may address me directly, without recourse to rumor." The challenge was unmistakable. Lady Penhest stepped forward, mask discarded, cheeks flushed. "You would accuse your peers of conspiracy, Your Grace?" "I accuse no one," Lucien replied smoothly. "I merely illuminate shadows." He turned then to Serafina, lowering his voice though the ballroom strained to hear. "You once defended innocence with eloquence," he said. "Will you now stand beside me in defense of truth?" The invitation was both public and intimate. To refuse would suggest division, to accept would bind her irrevocably to the confrontation. She felt the tremor of risk and the steadiness of conviction rise together. "I shall stand," she answered clearly, where integrity requires. Applause began hesitantly, then strengthened as uncertainty shifted into reluctant admiration. Those who had anticipated drunken spectacle found instead composed defiance. Lucien lifted the goblet once more. For a suspended heartbeat, all believed he would drink deeply, confirming or contradicting his words. Instead, he turned toward a nearby servant and placed the untouched glass upon a silver tray. "Let this suffice as my final indulgence," he said quietly. The gesture was small, almost understated, yet its symbolism was undeniable. Gasps rippled more forcefully than before. Music resumed, tentative at first, then assured. The masquerade transformed from anticipated debauchery into an exhibition of calculated revelation. Serafina sensed the axis shift once more. The Duke was no longer the subject of idle wager. He had become an unpredictable adversary. As they moved to dance, Lucien leaned closer, his voice low against the swell of violins. "They will not yield easily," he murmured. "Exposure breeds desperation." "Then we must be prepared," she replied. He regarded her with newfound intensity, as though measuring the depth of her resolve. "You comprehend that alignment with me may invite retaliation." "I comprehend," she said steadily, "that retreat would invite surrender." The waltz carried them beneath chandeliers ablaze with light, their reflections entwined upon polished floors. Around them, conversation resumed in altered tones, no longer mocking but cautious. Yet as the final notes faded, a footman approached with urgent discretion, presenting Lucien with a sealed envelope delivered moments earlier. The crest impressed upon its wax was unmistakable, the insignia of a powerful consortium of investors long entwined with Ashford affairs. Lucien's expression hardened infinitesimally as he accepted it. Serafina felt the fragile triumph of the evening contract into apprehension once more. Whatever shadows had been illuminated, they had not dispersed, they had merely shifted position. And as Lucien broke the seal, the music swelling anew to disguise the gravity of the moment, she realized that Lucien opened the envelope with deliberate care, the wax seal cracking like thin ice beneath pressure. The room's candlelight caught the faint emblem upon the parchment, an insignia Serafina recognized only from rumors, a consortium of investors whose influence stretched beyond London's polite society into the mechanics of industry and debt. Their correspondence was seldom benign. The letter's contents remained hidden from her view, but the tightening of his expression told a story more potent than ink. She watched him read. The muscles of his jaw worked, controlled yet unmistakable. His eyes scanned each line with measured speed, absorbing implication. When he finished, he folded the document once and placed it upon the side table as though it were no more consequential than a calling card. The gesture was practiced. Too practiced. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated, briefly, imperceptibly. "A matter of accounts." The vagueness unsettled her. "Accounts that concern the manor?" "Indirectly." She stepped closer, searching his face for clarity. The firelight revealed subtle lines of strain. Not the disarray of drunkenness as rumor insisted, but the quiet burden of calculation. He had orchestrated the evening's revelation with precision, yet this new correspondence disturbed him. The shift in his composure suggested stakes beyond public perception. "If there is danger," she said, "I would rather know it." He regarded her with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. Knowledge is not always protection. And ignorance is never so. A faint exhale, almost a sigh, escaped him. "Very well." He retrieved the letter once more and handed it to her. The parchment was cool beneath her gloved fingers. The handwriting, formal and uncompromising, outlined grievances regarding recent financial withdrawals and the disruption of established arrangements. It referenced investments predicated upon the Duke's continued participation in certain ventures he had publicly renounced. The implication crystallized with alarming clarity. "These men," she murmured, reading the final line, "believed your reputation would remain unchanged." "Yes. And now it will not." "No." Silence expanded between them, filled only by the distant murmur of guests and the faint crackle of the hearth. The masquerade had succeeded in shifting perception, yet perception was currency in a world of power. If the consortium profited from his decline, his reformation threatened their interests. Conflict, therefore, was inevitable. "You warned that exposure breeds desperation," she said. He nodded. "Then they will act." "Possibly." The understatement chilled her. "How?" He turned away, gazing into the fire as though seeking answers within its embers. "Through pressure. Influence. Leverage." "Leverage over what?" Pause. When he spoke, his voice was lower. Over those connected to me. The meaning struck like a physical blow. Serafina understood at once that she was included in that category. Their marriage bound her to his fortunes and misfortunes alike. If adversaries sought to destabilize him, they might target her family, her reputation, the fragile security she had only just begun to reclaim. "Are you saying they might harm my father?" she asked. "I am saying they might exploit vulnerabilities." Her hands tightened around the letter. "You promised transparency. And I give it. Then tell me plainly." He faced her once more. The firelight softened none of the gravity in his gaze. "There are individuals who profit from instability. They view my withdrawal as loss. They may attempt to compel compliance. By threatening us." Yes. The admission should have frightened her. Instead, it kindled resolve. She had spent years navigating the consequences of her father's debts, enduring whispers and pity. She understood the cost of helplessness. "What must we do?" she asked. "We must prepare." The simplicity of the answer belied its weight. Preparation implied action, measured, strategic, unromantic. The life she had imagined as Duchess of Ashford had contained vague notions of domestic adjustment and social expectation. It had not accounted for clandestine opposition. "Preparation," she repeated. "You speak as though conflict is certain. It is prudent to assume it. And if we are wrong? Then we have wasted effort." She studied him, searching for duplicity and finding none. His demeanor remained composed, yet beneath it lay determination. He was not retreating into old habits. He was confronting consequence. "Do you regret your decision?" she asked suddenly. He blinked, surprised by the question. "Which decision?" "To change." He considered. "No. Even now. Especially now." The conviction in his tone stirred something within her, a fragile respect, tempered by apprehension. He had chosen transformation despite cost. That choice had drawn opposition. It had also bound her to a future she scarcely understood. "I married you believing I would become a symbol of pity," she confessed. "A daughter traded to settle debt." He listened without interruption. "I expected shame," she continued. "Instead I find complexity, responsibility, and danger." His expression softened infinitesimally. "You are more than a symbol." The words lingered, quiet yet profound. She searched his eyes for insincerity and found none. The realization unsettled and strengthened her in equal measure. "Then we face this together," she said. He inclined his head. Together. The agreement should have offered comfort. Yet as the evening deepened and guests departed, an uneasy stillness settled over the manor. Servants extinguished candles in distant corridors, leaving pockets of shadow. The letter remained on the side table, its warning unfulfilled but potent. Serafina approached the window. Beyond the glass, the garden lay under moonlight, white roses glimmering like small constellations. They had been cultivated with care, symbols of renewal. Now they seemed fragile, susceptible to frost. Lucien joined her, standing a respectful distance away. "You asked once if I would protect you from truth," he said. She looked at him. "I cannot promise safety," he continued. "I can promise honesty and effort." It was not the vow of a fairy tale. It was something harder. "I accept that," she replied. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good." The word carried quiet approval. For the first time since her arrival, Serafina felt the faint stirrings of agency. She was not merely a passive participant in circumstances shaped by men. Her father's debts, society's judgments, her husband's reputation. She was a partner in whatever came next. Yet the letter's implications remained unresolved. The consortium's interests had been disrupted. Retaliation loomed. The masquerade had revealed their defiance, but defiance invited consequence. As she gazed at the moonlit garden, a thought emerged, unbidden and disquieting. What if the warning had not been intended solely for Lucien? What if it had been addressed to her as well, a reminder that by aligning herself with him she had entered a broader conflict? The idea chilled her. Lucien followed her gaze. "The roses will survive the season," he said softly. She turned to him. "Do you believe that?" "I believe they are resilient." "And we?" He met her eyes. "I intend to be." The sincerity of the statement resonated. Yet resilience did not guarantee victory. The path ahead remained uncertain, shaped by forces they barely comprehended. Outside, a distant carriage rattled along the gravel drive, a late departure or perhaps an arrival. The sound was faint but unmistakable, a reminder that the world beyond the manor continued to move. Decisions made here would ripple outward. Serafina placed a hand upon the windowsill, feeling the cool glass beneath her palm. "What happens next?" she asked. Lucian regarded the darkened drive. "We wait." It was not the answer she desired, yet it was honest. Preparation required patience. Conflict demanded strategy. The soft glow of the garden and the distant echo of wheels underscored the precariousness of their situation. She exhaled slowly. "Then we wait," she echoed. Together they stood in silence, watching the night. The letter remained on the table, a tangible symbol of unseen opposition. The masquerade's triumph had shifted perception but not eradicated threat. Somewhere beyond the manor's walls, forces stirred, calculating, observing, deciding. Serafina realized that her life had altered irrevocably. The daughter once traded to settle debt was now duchess, participant in struggles of power and consequence. Love, if it existed between them, was intertwined with duty and risk. As the moon climbed higher, casting pale light across the roses, she felt a subtle resolve take root. She would learn the rules of this new world. She would not be merely protected but informed, engaged, and resilient. The future remained uncertain. And in that uncertainty lay both danger and possibility. Lucian read the second letter in silence, eyes moving with controlled precision, absorbing each accusation as though weighing its value. The parchment trembled slightly in his hand, not from fear but from the pressure of restraint. Serafina watched him, searching for betrayal or collapse, yet found neither. He exhaled slowly and set the document down beside the first, arranging them neatly as though order might diminish their meaning. The gesture was deliberate, almost ritualistic, an attempt to contain chaos. "These men," he said at last, voice low, "believe my withdrawal from their ventures threatens them." She stepped closer. "Ventures that relied upon your indulgence." "Yes." The admission carried no defensiveness. He did not deny the past. He acknowledged it as one acknowledges an old wound, present, undeniable, yet no longer defining. Serafina studied him, recognizing the strain in his posture, the faint tightness around his eyes. He had orchestrated the masquerade with calculated defiance, exposing his intention to change. Now the consequences arrived in ink and implication. "What do they want?" she asked. "To restore equilibrium." The word felt clinical. Equilibrium, balance, an arrangement from which they profited. If Lucian remained disciplined, their influence waned. If he relapsed into reputation, their investments retained value. The conflict was not personal in their view, it was transactional. "And if you refuse?" she pressed. His gaze met hers. "They will apply pressure." The simplicity of the statement unsettled her. Pressure. A vague term concealing specific possibilities. Financial manipulation. Social ostracism. Legal entanglements. Perhaps threats she could not yet imagine. She thought of her father's debts, the years of humiliation that had preceded this marriage. She had believed that union with the Duke might offer stability. Now stability seemed fragile. "Will they come for us?" she asked. "Not directly." The qualification mattered. Not directly. Indirection was more dangerous. It allowed deniability, the slow erosion of security rather than open confrontation. She imagined subtle sabotage, credit withdrawn, alliances broken, rumors revived. The world of London society thrived on perception. If perception turned hostile, reality followed. Lucian noticed her expression and softened his tone. "I will not allow harm." The promise carried weight, yet it was not absolute. He could not control every variable. She understood that now. Protection was effort, not guarantee. "I do not wish to be a liability," she said quietly. "You are not." Her hands tightened at her sides. "If they target me, if they use my family, they will not." His certainty bordered on defiance. She searched his face, seeking evidence. He believed what he said. He intended to shield her. But intent did not erase vulnerability. "What if they succeed?" she asked. He hesitated. A rare pause. "Then we respond." The answer lacked romantic flourish. No assurances of invincibility. Only action. Response. Adaptation. It was perhaps more honest. Serafina turned toward the window. Night cloaked the gardens, white roses pale beneath moonlight. They had survived the storm, petals intact though damp with dew. Resilience. The word echoed in her thoughts. She had survived humiliation, debt, and societal judgment. Now she faced a new challenge, one tied to forces beyond her comprehension. "I married you believing my greatest struggle would be acceptance," she said. Lucien joined her, maintaining respectful distance. And now? Now I see that acceptance was only the beginning. He regarded the garden. Life seldom offers singular trials. She considered that. Her father's choices had shaped her destiny, yet she possessed agency within it. As Duchess, she could influence perception. As partner, she could contribute to strategy. The conflict before them demanded participation. "What can I do?" she asked. He looked at her, surprise flickering briefly. "Do." To assist. The word hung between them. Not passive support but active involvement. He studied her as though measuring capability, not with condescension but with care. "Information," he said finally. "Observe. Listen. If you encounter inquiries, respond with measured honesty. Do not allow speculation to dictate narrative." She nodded. "I can do that." "Good." The simplicity of his approval stirred something within her, quiet determination. She would not be ornamental. She would be engaged. A distant sound interrupted the moment, the faint crunch of gravel near the drive. Both turned instinctively toward the window. A carriage waited at the gates, dark and unmarked. No crest adorned its side. No footman descended. It remained still, an anonymous presence. Serafina's pulse quickened. "We have a visitor." Lucien stepped closer, observing. At this hour, the carriage door opened. A figure emerged, cloaked and indistinct, pausing beneath the lantern's weak glow. Though features remained hidden, the posture conveyed purpose. The visitor approached the gate and spoke briefly to the attendant. After a moment's hesitation, the gates opened. The figure proceeded toward the manor. Serafina felt a chill. "Is this expected?" "No." Lucien's tone sharpened. He turned from the window and moved toward the door, pausing only to glance back at her. "Remain here." She straightened. "I will accompany you." He considered, then nodded once. "Very well. Stay close." They descended the staircase together, footsteps quiet against polished wood. The house felt different at night, more ancient, more watchful. Portraits of former dukes observed from their frames, expressions carved in oil and memory. Serafina imagined generations of Ashfords confronting similar uncertainties. At the entrance hall, a servant awaited with strained composure. "Your Grace," he said, bowing. "A visitor requests audience." "Who?" Lucien asked. The servant hesitated. He would not provide a name. Serafina exchanged a glance with her husband. Anonymous visitors rarely bore good news. "Show him to the drawing room," Lucien instructed. The servant departed. Silence settled. "Caution," Lucien murmured. She nodded. They proceeded to the drawing room, a space of velvet furnishings and subdued elegance. The fire burned low, casting amber light across polished surfaces. Moments later, the visitor entered. He removed his hood. The man was older, his face lined with experience rather than hardship. His gaze held intelligence, measuring the room and its occupants. Though well-dressed, he carried no air of social familiarity. "Your Grace," he said. Lucien regarded him. "You arrive unannounced." "I prefer efficiency." The statement revealed little. Serafina observed the stranger, noting the subtle confidence in his posture. He was not a supplicant. "And your name?" Lucien asked. The man smiled faintly. "Names are convenient. They change." The ambiguity unsettled her. Lucien's expression hardened. "I will not entertain riddles. Nor do I offer them." The visitor reached into his coat and produced a folded document, placing it upon a small table. "I bring information." Serafina tensed. "Another letter." Lucien approached, unfolding the parchment. His eyes moved swiftly across the text. This time his composure fractured, barely. A flicker of something sharp crossed his features. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated, then handed the document to her. The words were precise and devastating. Evidence of transactions linking the consortium to her father's former debts. Arrangements designed to profit from default. References to her marriage appeared in coded language, suggesting interest in its outcome. It was not accusation. It was confirmation. Serafina felt the room tilt slightly. The implications were immense. Her family's misfortune had not been mere accident. Forces had exploited it. The visitor watched silently. Lucien spoke first. "Why deliver this?" "Because change serves no one if it remains unseen." The answer unsettled him. "You expect reward." "No." The simplicity surprised both of them. "Then what do you want?" Serafina asked. The man regarded her. "Justice." The word resonated. Justice, an ideal, elusive yet powerful. Her father had never spoken of such things. Debt had dictated survival. Now she confronted the possibility that suffering had been engineered. Lucien set the document down. You implicate powerful interests. Yes. And you come alone. I prefer it. The exchange revealed courage or perhaps calculation. Serafina could not decide. Why approach us? She asked. The visitor met her gaze. Because you are involved. The bluntness struck. She understood. Her marriage connected her to consequences beyond domestic adjustment. The conflict extended outward, political, financial, moral. Lucien studied the stranger. What is your name? This time the man answered. Elias. No title. No pretense. Lucien inclined his head slightly. Elias, I will examine your information. Do so quickly. The warning hung in the air. Elias departed without ceremony. Silence returned. Serafina looked at Lucien. What now? He regarded the document. Now we learn the extent of what we face. The statement carried weight. The central conflict had shifted from social perception to systemic opposition. They were no longer merely a duke and duchess navigating rumor. They were participants in a struggle shaped by unseen forces. She reached for his hand. He allowed it. We will face it, she said. He squeezed her fingers gently. Together. Outside, the night remained still, yet beneath its quiet surface currents moved. Decisions had been made. Information exchanged. The path ahead stretched uncertain and demanding. Serafina understood that transformation required courage. She had been traded, judged, and underestimated. Now she chose engagement. The challenge remained. And the story, unresolved, beckoned toward what came next.